The name Slade Wilson strikes fear across continents. But the man behind Deathstroke didn't become the world's deadliest mercenary by accident. His abilities, his instincts, his very blood, all of it traces back thousands of years to an ancient warrior bloodline most have never heard of. This is the legend of the Wilson lineage. It begins in the mountains of ancient Macedonia, centuries before Alexander would conquer the known world. There existed a sect of warriors known as the Cryptia Shadow Soldiers who operated outside the laws of civilization. They weren't just fighters, they were something else entirely. The Cryptia believed that combat prowess could be bred, refined, passed down through generations like precious metal through ore. They practiced selective unions, matching their greatest warriors with one another, tracking bloodlines with obsessive precision. The goal was simple: create the perfect soldier, a human being optimized for war. Among these warriors, one family distinguished itself above all others. The Wilsons, though that name would come later, were the crown jewels of this program. Generation after generation, they produced fighters of supernatural ability, reflexes that bordered on precognition, strength that defied their frames. Most importantly, minds that processed combat like ordinary people process breathing. Now, this wasn't magic, at least not exactly. The Cryptia had stumbled upon something that modern science would later attempt to replicate: the activation of dormant genetic potential. Through their centuries of selective breeding, they had created a bloodline where certain genes expressed themselves far more potently than in ordinary humans. But here's where the legend gets interesting. The sect didn't survive. Around 200 BCE, the Cryptia were wiped out, massacred by enemies who feared what they were creating. The surviving warriors scattered across the Mediterranean, blending into populations, hiding their heritage. The Wilson bloodline went underground. For centuries, they appeared throughout history as exceptional soldiers, tacticians, and killers. A Roman centurion who single-handedly held a bridge against 100 Gauls. A Byzantine bodyguard who sensed assassins before they struck. A crusader knight whose sword arm never tired. The pattern was always the same: extraordinary combat ability, tactical genius, and a certain coldness. By the time the bloodline reached the Wilson family in America, much of this history had been forgotten. The genetic legacy, however, remained dormant, waiting for the right catalyst. Enter Slade Wilson. When Slade joined the United States military, he was already exceptional. His instructors noted his unusual reflexes, his ability to read opponents, his almost inhuman stamina. But he was still operating at a fraction of his potential. The military saw something in him, something they wanted to unlock. Project Rebirth was long dead, having produced only one successful super soldier decades earlier. But its principles lived on in black-budget programs scattered across government facilities. One such program targeted Slade. The experimental serum they injected him with was designed to enhance human capabilities: strength, speed, healing. What the scientists didn't anticipate was how it would interact with Slade's unique genetic makeup. You see, the serum didn't just enhance him, it activated something. All those dormant genes carefully cultivated over millennia by the Cryptia suddenly switched on. The ancient warrior bloodline, suppressed for generations, roared back to life. The serum was merely the key that unlocked a door built thousands of years ago. The results were beyond anything the project had seen. Slade's brain now utilized 90% of its capacity. His reflexes accelerated to superhuman levels. His body could heal from wounds that would kill ordinary soldiers. But perhaps most significantly, his tactical mind, that gift passed down through countless generations of warrior ancestors, became something approaching tactical omniscience. He could read a battlefield the way a chess grandmaster reads a board. Every possibility, every outcome calculated in microseconds. The military had created their perfect soldier, or so they thought. What they failed to understand was that the Wilson bloodline carried more than just physical gifts. There was a psychological component as well. The Cryptia had bred for something beyond combat ability. They had bred for detachment, for the capacity to kill without hesitation, without remorse. This wasn't cruelty, it's efficiency. Slade's transformation amplified this trait alongside everything else. The man who emerged from Project Rebirth was capable of extraordinary violence and completely at peace with it. His military career ended badly. Betrayals, cover-ups, the usual government corruption. Slade walked away from the system that made him, but he didn't walk away from what he was. He became Deathstroke, the mercenary who never failed, the assassin who couldn't be stopped, the Terminator. Throughout his career, Slade would occasionally encounter evidence of his ancestry. Ancient texts referencing the cryptia, genetic researchers puzzled by anomalies in his DNA, other descendants of the program, scattered across the world, drawn to violence like moths to flame. He learned to accept what he was, not just a super soldier, but the culmination of a 2,000-year breeding program. The perfect warrior his ancestors had dreamed of creating. And here's the tragic part. The bloodline didn't stop with Slade. His own offspring inherited the curse. Grant, Joseph, Rose, each carrying that same genetic potential, that same capacity for extraordinary violence. The Wilson family legacy continued, whether they wanted it or not. Some embraced it, others fought against it. None could escape it, because you can't outrun your blood. The cryptia may be gone, their mountain fortresses crumbled to dust. But their experiments succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. In Slade Wilson, they achieved their impossible dream. They created the perfect soldier. The only question is, what happens when the perfect soldier answers to no one but himself?